Hi everyone, and welcome to Write Your Narrative, a weekly podcast where we are discussing everything street art related happening in South Florida. I'm your host, Pascal D from Token of the Wall. This week, my guest is Yuval Ofir, the creative mind behind Yo Miami, an art and events consulting agency. He's also an entrepreneur, a businessman, an art curator, a community advocate, a writer, and a podcast host, and a dad. Let's find out how he can wear so many different hats and stay on top of it. We are officially at the new Write Your Narrative house. From now on, we're going to be recording from a Jolt radio studio in Alapata. And my guest today is a good friend that we're going back to 12 years together, Mr. Yuval Ofir. Yuval, good morning and welcome to Write Your Narrative.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you always.
You're very welcome. So how's everything going today?
It's good. The sun is out. The rain is drying.
Yes, finally had a little bit of a rain. Yes, we needed that rain. It's been hot in Miami.
It's going to be today also.
It's going to be today? Well, this is why we're here in Miami. How can we complain about that?
Here in the AC at least.
Yes, here in the AC, yes. So it's good to have a new house for the podcast, finally.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's going on 2 months now. It's still something brand new. So we'll see. We're going to take a little pause in August and then start a season 2, and then we'll go from there.
Exciting.
One podcast at a time, and eventually, I may have a co-host with me.
Yeah, no, don't look at me.
Don't look at me? What do you mean? You don't want to co-host a podcast?
No, I'm trying to do less things.
Less things? Oh.
Less things better.
The less the better? Yeah, okay. All right.
No, I'm trying to do less things, but do the things better.
I'll do the things better. All right, cool. It's a little awkward, those mic.
Yeah, I can. You want me to lean over? I didn't want to be sideways.
No. It's just a little... Anyway.
You're getting used to it.
So, Mr. Yuval, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners.
Sure. I assume that some of your listeners probably know me personally, but
right now most of our listeners.
But yeah, as we get out into the airwaves, into the masses, my name is Yuval Ofir. I started a company called Yo Miami in 2010, 2011, and I have done, as I alluded to earlier, too many things, but the short way I put it now is I do consulting specialized on creative events. I run also an artist studio collective space in Little Haiti called Yo Space, and I also have a nonprofit that I'm in the middle of getting more active, but it's
right. So a lot of different hats that you're wearing. So to go back to Yo Space and Yo Miami, because this is how you really got involved with the art community down here in Miami. So how did you actually get started with the art? It's just because you had that space that you decided to create those artist studios?
No, so the space came later. I started, so I moved to Edgewater in 2009 when I graduated from UM. Mainly because as a real, genuine, born and raised in Miami person, I don't like commutes and sitting in traffic. So I find my bubble and then I just live in my little bubble. So I was living down south while I was in school, and then I moved to Edgewater because I was working for my grandpa's business, which the warehouse was in Wynwood, perfume distribution. And then I just started going out in that area, places like Vagabond and Bar Black, White Room, Transit Lounge, all these places that don't exist anymore, unfortunately.
Yes.
But and I would meet artists. It was also, we would actually have, because the warehouse was right on 29th Street and 5th Avenue, we actually had, especially around Basel, artists would just literally randomly come knock on the door wanting to paint the walls. And so I started, really the first thing I did once I started meeting artists, I had a musician friend of mine who did a pop-up show at a retail store up in North Miami, and he knew I was starting to meet artists, so he's like, "Oh, I would really love to have like a graffiti artist to come and like live paint while we're doing the event." So I want to say it was like $100, something like nothing, but that was the first time I reached out to one of the graffiti guys I knew, set it up, and then I don't even think I took money. I think I just gave him $100.
Do you remember who this was at the time?
I do, but I don't want to give him any credit.
Oh, you don't want to give him any credits? All right.
We had a falling out.
Oh, someone who doesn't give credit, they deserve credit. Oh, that is so bad. That is so sad.
I hope he's doing well. I just don't know.
Yes.
But so anyway, I started with that, and then I started producing murals at the warehouse in Wynwood in the driveway, and then the front of the building. We got tagged and we needed to fix it, so I proposed to my grandpa, what we would spend to just paint it flat. Let me take that money and get something nice done, like a mural. And I did the first mural with Kazilla.
Yes, I think I remember this one. Yeah.
And so we did it the first year with her. Then we did her and Trek 6 did a collaboration. I think it was 2 years later. And eventually Claudio Picasso did. So a lot of the artists who are now like really well established in the South Florida street art world, I was able to work with them in those very early days. Initially with the warehouse, and then honestly, all of it happened. It was very organic, but it was a lot of what I learned from my grandpa in the perfume business. In terms of, so he's Tunisian, French, very like hustle man. I grew up with like 7 brothers and sisters in a village.
Okay, big family.
And so a lot of what I learned about, he says in French, which I know you'll understand, maybe not the listeners, but he used to say "Tu sais jamais d'où ça vient," which is basically you never know where it's going to come from. And that's definitely a philosophy that I absorbed from him, and kind of always being attuned to, or like the open to the possibility of opportunities. And that's really how I started getting more and more opportunities to do projects with artists.
Yeah, talking about Kazilla, any news from her? She kind of disappeared from the face of Wynwood. She was really, really involved in the art community at some point. She was on the cover of the Talking of the Wall. She was, and then, she vanished in thin air.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people who started in those days, the early 2000s, definitely know, either know of or know Kazilla directly. She was very instrumental and influential in the development of the street art movement in the early 2000s. And like you say, now the last time I saw her, I want to say was in around like 2015, 2016. And yeah, artists can be, chaotic tornadoes
Creatures.
of energy, and
she was part of the few and far that women's crew. I mean, she was very, very active at some point.
No, for sure. And I did a lot of projects. She was I think the second artist that we had at Yo Space. I did a lot of projects with her, and I heard about, I think a year ago, someone that had run into her, that she was like at least alive, doing okay, but just not really as active doing the art stuff. So it's sad, but it's life,
Well, that's life, yes. Yeah. People move on, and then different things. So talking about all the different hats that you wear, you are definitely wearing so many hats. You're an entrepreneur, you're a businessman, an art curator. You did also a podcast. You also had a podcast right here at Jolt Radio.
Well, the old spot.
That was still Jolt Radio at the time. For 2 years you did? You say you did that?
Yeah, so I produced 2 shows. Each one was monthly, so it ended up being bi-weekly. But for 2 years, here at Jolt Radio.
All right. You're also a writer for the Miami New Times.
Yeah, I've submitted. I've had some work published by the New Times. I'm not on staff or anything, but
you're not on staff. But I mean, this is one of your hats.
Yeah,
you're also a father, and that's a full-time job. That's a full-time job. That you are producing some events and a comedy show. You had a comedy show also at Your Space for a couple of years.
Oh, more than
that. Well, a couple in English means like
2.
Usually means more. It usually means more than 2.
But yeah, so I started producing comedy shows in 2014. Originally not at Yo Space, but the first show I started producing was at Wynwood Brewing Company. It was the first, since it was technically the first commercial brewery in the city of Miami. It was also the first comedy show at a brewery in the city of Miami. And that ended up being, for a while, the longest running monthly comedy show in Miami. We stopped in 2021, mainly just because the venue we were doing at shut down. And so I consider it on hiatus. I'm hoping to bring it back at some point, but it has to be in the right circumstances.
All right, with the right people in the right in the right place. So how do you manage your daily schedule with all those different things? You wake up in the morning, you read the magazines, you read the internet stuff, and then you go on with your day. Of course, you have work, but
Yeah, no, I try generally. So again, I have my daughter half the time. So depending if I have her or not, I'm doing school drop off, and all of that in the morning. But I usually try actually. I'll have anywhere from 4 to 10 things on my to-do list, like the main things to do for that day. That I try to is a mix of the things I didn't finish the last day, and I pushed it to the next day, and then things that were already on the calendar. And I try, especially in the last, I'd say maybe with the pandemic in the last few years, I've tried to kind of find a more structured way to approach it in terms of, prioritizing things and time management. But I also got diagnosed with ADHD a couple years ago, and it made a lot of things make sense. So it's not my strong suit, but I've especially since getting diagnosed, it's helped me kind of think about it in different ways and find tools to help me.
So now you find an excuse for it.
I mean, listen, it's more for me. It's a perspective to look at kind of the why I'm very. It could be a whole nother podcast in terms of talking about the labels and diagnosis and all those things. But I think it just gives me a lens to look at it through to say, okay, well, that just means I'm not going to focus on one thing straight for an hour, but it allows me to break it up where I'll say, okay, I'm going to focus on, for example, like reviewing and editing photos for 20 to 30 minutes, and then I'm going to take a break for 5-10 minutes and put some laundry in the machine, or it depends. So I'll work from home some days, and then I have my office at YoSpace that I work at other days, and other days I'm driving around meeting with people, doing podcasts.
Doing podcasts. What a good idea. What a good idea. So how do you actually stay informed of everything happening in the local community? Because you are very, very involved with the local communities. You are really a community advocate. You're always in the know.
I'll say, I mean, part of it is just like an ingrained kind of like a personality trait, I think, of just I was always very curious, always very like paying attention. Yes. And, when I was a kid, it was like, looking at, bugs, like, like in the sidewalk and whatever. And also observing kind of like the people in school and both, the adults and the kids, and kind of trying to understand how, how all of these things fit together and worked. And so once I got to like college and a little bit after college, I started actually following at the time, there were a lot of smaller blogs, like Sweat Records had theirs, and there was a handful of others that were covering kind of the subculture, both, artists, music, like all of these kind of cultural elements. Yes. And, that's when I got into the habit of really, it would be like every morning almost, like a routine of every morning checking, this and that blog. And the New Times was a little bit more, a little bit less polished, let's say, or less corporate at the time. So it was a little bit more, I don't check it, I would say, like every day now. But And yeah, now it's shifted where I have less time. Like you said, I'm a dad, so that already cuts, a lot of my bandwidth in terms of time to just absorb all this information. But I would say now it's mostly through following specific people, like in a variety of categories, like on Instagram and other social media. And then it's also, honestly, it's, they say it's who you know, and it's...
Yes, it very much so.
And I think, even, people like you and all the people who were part of this kind of tight community when I started in the early 2000s, at this point, they've all grown their own practice or networks. And so now...
Very true.
They've become kind of these connection points for me to kind of, I look at what they're doing, and then that gives me a little window into the world that they've built and the people who are a part of it.
No, totally. I mean, this is something very strong here in Miami with the artists, with people like you. People seems to be very, very involved with their own communities, not just in their own world. They talk a lot about it. They like to engage people. So that's something that I found very, very interesting. not everybody is just in his own little world, in his own little niche, but we do communicate quite a lot down here, and which is something I really had no idea coming down to Miami. I was just like, me living in Broward County, it's just like, okay. And then when I came down here, well, there's plenty of real people down here who are involved. There's a lot of doers.
I would say, I mean, the best term that I've heard that for me describes some of what you're talking about is silos. And I think that that's the thing where I agree that there is some element of kind of spillover where there are certain people, organizations that do kind of cross the lines into different camps, you know?
Yes.
But I do think that there's also some extent of isolation in terms of, you know, you have the Bird Road Arts District people, you have the Wynwood people, you have... And there was, especially I would say in the early, like from 2009 to 2015 or 16, I think it was definitely where Wynwood became this magnet that was really pulling the people from all different sides of the culture. So the, you know, the established like institution people, the collectors, the artists, the business people who were opening venues. I think everyone kind of got drawn to Wynwood, whether they were from Broward, whether they're from out of the state, out of the country. And they all kind of gravitated to this central like hotspot. And I think what's happened over the last, I guess, 10 or 12 years, since like maybe 2016, so 8 to 10 years, I think that impact that was happening then, it's almost like, you know, when a comet hits and you have the initial impact where it's like this big like explosion.
There is a big explosion going on right now, yes.
Well, I think now it's kind of the aftershock, like the ripple effect of after that big explosion. Now you see all these other neighborhoods further out that are kind of taking their lead from what happened in Wynwood, and they're trying to, which what happened in Wynwood was really orchestrated by developers who saw the same thing happen in New York, Soho and you know, in Brooklyn and Greenwich Village, and kind of recognized the role that artists and creatives and this kind of underground culture, the role that played in creating this buzz and this this idea of a community or like a hot neighborhood. And they, you know, for better and worse, found ways to intentionally cultivate those phenomena here in Wynwood. And then, you know, and then once it's you know, it's like the game of I feel like there's a French expression, but it's like the kind of the copycat, the game of like, you know, once there's something where people see it's successful, you're always going to have the vultures come and say, oh, well, I can do that. And
then people want to duplicate whatever works some places, just like in the music business. I mean, you hear the same tunes, the same song over and over, sung by sing by different people or different things.
Yeah. But the problem, I think, is there was some extent of with Wynwood in like the, you know, 2009 to 2016, that even though there was some degree of this like outside hands shaping things, it was much less extreme in the way that it was being done, where now these kind of second, third generation, quote unquote, like developers or you know, investors that are coming in, I think that it's so far removed from the original
intentions,
not even intentions, but from the initial like phenomena, because I think that's what it is really, it's like this perfect storm of the geographic, of the economic, like of all of these factors that allowed for creatives to come to this place and have the freedom to create and kind of interact, bounce off of each other, and having venues that, you know, the overhead was low enough that they could take the chance to experiment and to allow these people to do things in their spaces, that now, you know, when the rent is, you know, the crazy amounts that they are, when there's less room for risk, and it's more also, I think, a lack of, like, it's people don't really appreciate the value that these elements brought to the table. So they're like, yeah, we'll just, whatever, give me the cheap version of that and just throw it in there. And they think, like, they don't realize that without the authenticity behind it, it's gonna be like flavorless, and so okay, yeah, you'll spend the money on marketing and you'll get people out and they'll come and, oh, this is like the cool like hot spot, but then it always fades very quickly, and you see that with a lot of the like both recurring events or the new venues that open up, where it doesn't last. And it's, I think, because there's this lack of authenticity, of sincerity.
I can totally see that. Yeah, it's very diffuse now. It's yes, the art scene in Wynwood is still very present, but in such a different way, such a different way. Yes. So. Well,
I forgot what the original question was.
Yeah, these are some of the green pains. Well, the original question, who cares about the original question? There was an original question? Probably. But anyway, this is what I like in this podcast. It's just really to have a conversation, an open conversation. Way more than just a Q&A. Well,
for sure.
Yeah,
I can talk.
Oh yeah, you can talk. That's why that's why I'm kind of looking at the clock.
Yeah, you talk. I'm not looking, so you talk.
No, you're not looking. I don't even remember what time we started, but it doesn't matter. We can always edit. So or I can throw some music if we have to. I doubt we're gonna have to put some music because and you really have the knowledge of what you're talking, because you've been studying, you've been reading, you just like it's maybe like the old-fashioned way when people were in the morning reading the newspaper and going through all the different things. So you keep yourself very on top of everything, I guess, through Facebook, through the social media and everything. That's what you said. So
yeah, and it's at the end of the day, I think, coming back to what we just talked about, the one thing I can say about, like, oh, what do I do maybe different than other people, or what sets me apart, is at the end of the day, I really care about the people that are involved, about the artists, about the city. I mean, I'm born and raised here. Most of like the people that I knew in high school, like, couldn't wait to go to college in other places. I've heard for a big part of my life, including, especially now for different reasons, but, from people who kind of they're like, well, why do you want to stay? Like, Miami has no culture, like there's nothing here, it's not like XYZ city, like whether New York, LA, whatever. And I don't even say, like, there's elements of truth to what they're saying, but I always came like, my mindset about it was always, I feel a connection to this place. I've been lucky enough to travel, throughout the world, like within the States and internationally, and I've been to places that I'm like, oh, it's really nice, and I'd like to visit, but there is never anywhere that has had the feeling for me like Miami. And it's something where I'm always of the mindset, well, okay, let's do better. Like, if it doesn't exist, and that's most of the things that I started doing in the early days, was, this doesn't exist, so I'm gonna do it because I want it. It was almost like selfish. It's like, there's not a chill environment in which you can socialize with artists and get to know them and see their work and maybe buy something. And that's why I started doing the Average Joe art sales back in the day. It was born out of just my own vision of something that didn't exist, that I thought would be beneficial on different levels for different people. And then just saying, okay, well, I can sit here and complain that Miami doesn't have any of these things, or I can find a way to do it.
No, you did a lot. You're a doer more than just a talker. You can talk a lot, but you can do a lot. You've been doing a lot. You've been doing a lot. So are you a dreamer? Is that something that you dream about, all those different things that you are doing, or you're more a down-to-earth guy?
I'll say, actually, I think I'm a good balance of the two. I will say, I realized at a certain point, literally, I don't really dream at night. I realized, I don't know if it's just I never remember it, but I don't really dream that much literally. But I do think that I can be an idealist almost to a fault, some people would say. So in terms of having ideas for, how things could be, how they should be, I think that that's definitely something that I do. But I definitely also have my cynical side of saying, okay, and I know, we've worked together enough that you've seen that side, of, having to have one foot in reality to say, okay, if you spend all day dreaming and that's it, then nothing really happens. So if you want your dreams to be able to become a reality, you need to be able to, tie a string and anchor them somewhere in reality, at least.
And you don't blame your ADHD.
No. That's why, I say it's not an excuse. It's just something that, it's like, listen, are you using a spray can? Are you using a brush? Are you using a marker? You have to know what tools you have to know how you're going to approach the situation that you're using the tools in. So someone who's painting a mural, if they're doing it with spray paint, they're going to approach it differently than if they're using bucket paint or,
Correct,
a brush.
Yes.
And so it's more, I think it's important, and I think that there is a lack, and that's one of the next kind of things that I'm focusing on with Yo Miami, more with the nonprofit, is addressing, I think that there is this lack of guidance and mentorship within the visual art community specifically, but also just with creatives in generally, kind of with like guidance and mentorship around, the mental side, the spiritual side, however you want to frame it, but understanding like how are you approaching this, what's your goal, and how do you achieve it.
All right.
I see the time.
Plenty of good things.
You got a lot to work with.
No. We talk some really deep stuff. That's kind of thing. That's kind of cool. So you are part of that little group of down here in Miami. You are the shakers and makers. You are just the doers. So that's good.
Yeah, I'm in good company with you.
Well, yes, I've done quite a lot. And then you pause, and then you start again, and then you decide to do something to like this podcast. It's something brand new for me, and didn't think I would be talking that much, but that's kind of different. But the idea of the podcast was really to go back to those 2 years when I had the magazine, the Token of the Wall magazine. I'm gonna have to explain to the listeners one day what Token of the Wall was or is still that magazine. So we were just. It was just a support to the local art community, the local artists. I was really rooting for them, and I'm still are, and that's why in the podcast you're going to have a lot of people from Miami. Of course, I want to extend it to Broward County, to Palm Beach County, because there's a lot of things happening in the art world up there. So we're going to be talking about plenty of things. And then with all the connections we have, and maybe the guest host that we may have someday.
Maybe now and then. I could be like a sporadic.
Maybe now and then. So maybe now and then. All right. So something we are going to the last part of the podcast, and it's something that I usually I'll kind of repeat myself for the people who've been listening. I usually like to start an interview or to finish an interview with a quote. Okay. It's something that people can reflect on. Doesn't have to go on forever and ever, but I know you can. So this is the quote that I picked for you, and I'm going to let you read it. This is the last...
I thought you were going to ask me to give you a quote. Okay.
Oh, no. Oh, man, we will.
Can I give you one, and then I do this one?
Absolutely.
It's from my grandpa.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say it in French, and then I'm going to... French for you, and then I'm going to translate.
Absolutely.
So another one that my grandpa always said, I learned a lot from, God bless him, 94, still alive.
Still alive also. Yeah. Wow.
Qui peut le plus, peut le moins. So it's if you can do more, you can do less. So it's not a really good trend. It's better in French, but have you heard that? I don't know if it's like a common expression or if it's something that
it is. I haven't heard that in years. So
it's kind of like if you're prepared for anything, then you're in a better position to tackle whatever comes your way. I think that's how I interpret it.
That is very, very close. Yeah.
And I think it's fitting now. Let me now finish with the quote that you gave me, because I think it connects. The distance between dreams and reality is called action, by Unknown. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, so what do you think? This is action. It's...
Yeah, no, it fits perfectly with kind of some of the things that we touched on, and I think it's listen, that's what we're doing, and I get a lot of people that over the years they come to me and they have great ideas, and for sure, like I'm sure many of them could be spectacular. And I always say, I'm like, okay, come with a plan, because without the plan, it's an idea, and ideas there's millions, and without the plan, it doesn't materialize.
And plan B sometimes, because we never know. Life is not a straight shot, and life is definitely not a straight shot. So whatever happens, and happens for a reason, for no reasons.
Yeah.
But things do happen.
Yes, they do.
All right.
It's a good ending.
Well, Yuval, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I know we needed to have that little conversation. This is something.
I think it's the shortest conversation we ever.
It is one of the shortest conversations. Yes. Oh well, we're
okay.
just about half an hour. Oh yes, yes. We're gonna keep the rest of the recording.
You put it in the bonus.
Exactly.
Bonus
yes. Well, in the bonus features, you guys gonna have to pay for that. That's what some people told me. How are you gonna monetize the
Patreon?
Podcast? Well, yes, Patreon. Yeah, maybe you should have the dirt on the second.
Yeah, you gotta pay. That you really gotta pay
on the second one. Oh well, that's an idea. I'm always open for new ideas. Always
put it in action.
We're going to put it in action. All right, the doers and shakers, thank you so much again, Yuval. And thank you once again for Jolt Radio to having us on this podcast. I love the new house. All right, guys, we'll see you all later. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you so much, Yuval, for supporting the Miami art community and giving our listeners a glimpse of your daily life. Please follow and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. We are very proud to be broadcasting from Jolt Radio Miami. Shout out to John and our sound technician, Rafa. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next week on Write Your Narrative, a South Florida Street Art podcast.